I think one of the challenges, obviously, is we're moving from a deterministic world to a probabilistic world. And in a probabilistic world, you are entertaining, less sequential, less sequenced step-by-step analysis. So you do introduce a degree of risk, and obviously that's been a challenge with large language models today. They're not operating with 99.999% reliability. So how do you get that same level of reliability when you put a probabilistic model to bear in the example perhaps I've just given? And the answer for me is with the availability of mass computational capacity, it has to be about running hundreds of different scenarios that allow you to drive up, the 90% reliabilities to something in the 5 nines. So that is a challenge, and that's something that is being overcome too.
Right. And you talked about, the mission criticality of your client base and how in many cases it is life or death situation, or at the very least, it's critical to the economy. So you've got these mission critical operations. And then on one hand, that's what you've got on one hand. On the other hand, you've got innovation and leading edge technologies like we were talking about before. How do you manage the reliability and the need to be somewhat conservative and maybe risk adverse, for lack of a better word? You've got to make sure you're stable, you're reliable, you're not taking on any unnecessary risks in your operations and all that good stuff. How do you balance that with the innovative nature of what you're talking about? How do we bridge that gap or reconcile those two potentially competing priorities to be innovative versus reliable?
I'll give you a non-technical answer, and it's as simple as eyes wide open. You get into this dialogue and you get into pushing the boundaries with what is possible. And as long as you go in with a mind on the risks and you go in knowing you're pushing the boundaries and you find sensible ways, on a first principles basis to design solutions that are capable of being rigorously tested against the risks you've described, then you always end up in a better place. And the technology often isn't the problem. It's moving the hearts and minds. It's getting people into the art of the possible. It's, getting over the inertia that in mission critical operations you can't mess with it because of some of the things we've just described. So it's those types of motions. I was with a CEO recently of a large manufacturing chemicals business in the UK recently, and we talked about how to fabricate the next generation IT function in the future with next generation technology, and it was all a people-based conversation. How do I get my teams to accept the degree of change that's coming and to run towards it with eyes wide open?
Right. Yeah, you can be, risk or you can manage risk and innovation at the same time, but it's going to be probably not palatable to just take on the innovation and the risk without having solid risk mitigation, solid planning, all that good stuff, all the eyes wide open piece of it, I think.
And how can you bring additional data to bear to ultimately, de-risk what would otherwise be seen as a risk? So if it's, collective knowledge and experience in a business of generations of maintenance on a particular part of an asset, can you access OEM data? Can you access competitor data? What are the different dimensions that allow you to underwrite the quality of the decisions you take in the technology? Can you overlay that with weather? Can you overlay that with different modalities of data? Voice, video, pressure. There's an example which isn't quite answering your question or your statement that we're working on right now. Again, in a utility scenario, we're using robotics to inspect manhole ducts, and the robotics is gathering 20 different measurements every yard in a manhole duct. Pressure, light, video, gas sensing, you name it. So the more data you get, the more you can overlay it onto problem statement, the thing you're trying to solve. Obviously, the more you get accuracy.
Right. Yeah, that's a good, really good point. Now, what about this is from Bren on LinkedIn. Bren says, for organizations excited about AI and in particular agentic AI, but hesitant due to data quality, data availability and governance challenges, where should they start to unlock value responsibly? It's a
Well,
big question.
number one would be start.
Right.
Yeah, and find somebody you can partner with. The agentic capabilities pretty early in its maturity. Something that we do all the time with our customers, and I'm sure others do too. So start, develop a hypothesis, understand the data you have available, what the maturity is of that data, in each and every data component that you're using, and then the governance just flows naturally from that, in the sense of having to take the decisions you do in order to pilot the capability. Now, what we do in the early stages, Bernd, is we make sure that we've got human in the loop. So the agent will always have human in the loop until such time there's confidence that the agent can operate autonomously. And even then, in an autonomous situation, what we've built into our platform is agent lifecycle management. So everything's logged, everything's tracked, everything's secure. So in the unlikely event you have a problem, you've always got an ability to diagnose what happened and to roll things back if you need to. But I think the fundamental thing for me is, and I'm sure you'd agree, this wave of digital work is coming. This wave of robotics is coming. And my encouragement to everyone, us included, by the way, in our business, because we run business operations as well. It might be different, Bernd, for yours. That's exactly what we're doing. We're starting, and we're making it feel uncomfortable. And when you make it feel uncomfortable and you get into disruptive ways of thinking and innovation, you always end up in a better place.
Yeah. So speaking of being in a better place, when you look at some of your more successful customers that have deployed the IFS core product or the loops, or combination of the products that you guys offer, what is it that's made those clients more successful than others? Are there certain themes or certain lessons you have from some of your call it your top performing customers that have just done the most with technology, and what you'd consider the most successful with their digital transformation initiatives?
I think, it's a bit boring, but whenever I've seen projects not deliver or face challenge, it's the same old things. It's a lack of governance. It's a lack of user engagement at the beginning. It's a lack of, to-be process design. It's the governance. When things go a bit wrong, not calling things out wrong early. In some cases, the vendor's not close enough and they become a bit of a scapegoat. It's all the basic things. It's about 101 project management, and the best implementations that I've seen have got those things right. And we were very insistent with big programs of activity. We want to be around the table. We want skin in the game, because we recognize that things do go wrong. If you're pushing the boundaries and you're delivering next generation technology, it's really hard. And it's really hard at the technology level. It's really hard at the hearts and minds level. And we know there's going to be problems. So we want to be at the table, and we do that in as many cases as we can, so we can play our part in that sequencing. But it honestly, it's those things I find. Pretty much every case where there's been a challenging situation that I've been called into, something in the program management, something in the governance has gone on. It's got nothing to do with technology.
Yeah. Well, and you said it's kind of boring. And actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I think what we all should aspire to is, let's make our digital transformation boring. Boring in that it's not chaotic. It's not a train wreck. It's not a mess. It's not a bunch of firefighting. It's actually deliberate and planned. And you've got a clear vision for what it is you're trying to do. And you win the hearts and minds, as you said, to use your words. I think that's the key thing. And of course, having the right technology is important, but the right technology doesn't matter if you don't get that other stuff right that you're talking about.
I met a CEO yesterday who've committed to IFS, and he's put the program in a bit of a go slow. And I'm like, help me understand why you put it in a go slow. He's like, Mark, we don't understand what process we want. And we're going to run the risk. We're going to say to you, design us a system, and you're going to design a system, and you'll do the best you can. But if we're not clear on what we want, then, and you've not guided us on best practices, then we're just going to have a bunch of regret costs. And I applauded him. I was like, that's amazing. Somebody, senior business leadership position, recognizes the difference an enterprise application can make. And in that case, it's finance, and it's O&M, and it's asset service. And he's put the brakes on at his cost.
Yeah.
And he's done exactly the right thing.
Yeah. Well, and he brings up a good point too, in one of the things you just mentioned, in that you mentioned it a few minutes ago about how the vendor can oftentimes become a scapegoat when something goes wrong. And I think as a leader, it's easy and it sounds good in theory to say, well, Mark, you're the expert. You know the technology. Why don't you just go figure that out? And I'm going to be over here, doing my other day job.
Yeah.
And that's just never goes well. As smart as you are, as smart as your team is, as good as your technology is, that's just not going to work because it doesn't fit what that business needs necessarily. And so I think it's a
It's
good
why
point.
it's why we invested 10 years ago disproportionately in value engineering. We put a lot of effort into, and in simple terms, it's making sure that we've got a very detailed case, a value case, which is yes about financial metrics, but it's also about non-financial metrics that are relevant to that company. And everyone at the beginning, through the life cycle, by the time we get to the end of the business case creation or the value case, are super clear on what constitutes success. And that pervades all the way through the project life cycle and pervades into go live and beyond.